Okay, so I suspect this is going to be a relatively short lecture because we're still going to be talking about sexism, but we're going to be talking about specific forms, so hostile and benevolent sexism. So like I mentioned, we're still going to be talking about sexism in particular. So with sexism, there is this use of structural, institutional, and cultural power used by cis men to really take away from the rights, the resources of cisgender women and trans women, mainly for the benefit and privilege of men as a group. So what we're going to be talking about are two forms of sexism, and it's characterized as ambivalent sexism, and forms of ambivalent sexism include hostile and benevolent sexism. So we're going to talk about hostile sexism first. So hostile sexism is rooted in this belief that men are superior to women and competent than women. And with this particular belief, it communicates that men deserve dominance, men deserve power. With hostile sexism, if you look at the name hostile, it's really associated with a fear, and it's associated with aggressive forms of sexism. And what we have found with research, it's typically associated with the fear that feminism or leverage extracts power from men. And with this particular fear, there's the resulting behaviors of discrimination, more aggressive forms of behavior of sexism towards women. So benevolent sexism, I argue against saying gentle form of sexism. With benevolent sexism, it's more condescending. So women within this particular form of sexism, they're viewed as stereotypical, and they're viewed in restrictive roles. So when we think about gender differentiation, where men are associated with certain jobs, right? So men are working these leadership type jobs, these jobs that call for physical, for muscles and physical exertion. Whereas with women, it's more along the lines of women being in these jobs that are quote unquote gentle. So being a homemaker, or being a secretary, or being even a nurse, right? So while I recognize that, it's important to recognize that when it comes to women in these particular roles, they're restrictive, right? When it comes to being a homemaker, being a nurse, being a secretary, if you look at all these different jobs, they're calling for the sense of caring, right? When we think about a nurse cares for her patients. And within benevolent sexism, it suggests that women are better at taking care of people, caring about relationships than men. Whereas with men, they're not good at that, right? Men are more. It communicates that men are more competent at being independent and not so much being interdependent, being relational in nature. While when we're looking at it from that point of view, it seems nice on the outside, right? But if we're looking a little bit further into these roles, they're a lot more insidious. Heterosexual intimacy. So with benevolent sexism, not only does it promote heterosexism, so promoting this idea that heterosexuality is the norm, and it should be that way. Um, Heterosexual intimacy is also um, promoting this notion that women are women can only fulfill sexual needs, intimacy needs, right? Um, that's what that is promoting. With benevolent sexism, I did point out that some of the roles are nursing or secretarial jobs, right? And I want to be clear, there's nothing wrong about that. Um, However, when we look at when we look at benevolent sexism and the ways in which women are typically pushed into these roles, that's when it becomes a problem. Um, I'm not saying nursing is a problem, nor am I saying secretarial jobs are a problem. I think they're really important. They are really important jobs. It's whenever we're pushing women to, if a woman expresses that, hey, I want to be a doctor, with benevolent sexism, people who are benevolently sexist, they'll say, oh, that's nice that you want to be a doctor. How about a nurse? Um, and so what I'm getting at is, when a woman is aiming high, a woman identified person is aiming for a leadership type role, um, with benevolent sexism, people who are operating within that system, they move women to roles that are not as high on leadership, right? So really what I'm trying to convey is benevolent sexism is very insidious. It looks it looks, or it seems nice. What it really is, it's still rooted in male dominance. Um, when we think about paternalism, protective paternalism, it's suggesting that women are too sensitive to take care of themselves, that a man with a hardworking job can take care of this woman because she is so delicate and fragile, right? If we've seen those old time movies, right, um, where a man says, oh, hold on, let me get that for you, ma'am. It's done in a way that is condescending. And the book talks about doors being open for women, and women or men assuming that a woman can't carry like a bag. It might be a bag of bowling balls or a bag of whatever, but a man saying, oh, let me help you with that, since you're so fragile, since you're so delicate. Now I'm curious of what folks think about that when it comes to opening doors for women. And we typically see that we see opening doors for the person behind you in the South, but um, how do you feel about opening doors for, if you're a woman identified person, how do you feel about a man opening a door for you? And if you're a man identified person, how do you feel about opening a door for a woman identified person? What about whenever someone offers to help you with something that's really heavy? Um, so I'm curious of what folks think about that. Uh, just really curious. So when it comes to hostile and benevolent sexism, um, you see different things. First thing you see is categorization of women, objectification as an example. Within hostile sexism, women are seen as, they're seen as objects that are there to serve the man, that's the role that they're forced into. Whereas with benevolent sexism, women are pushed into roles that it wouldn't appear that that person's being objectified, but they are. So when we think about this categorization of women, what we notice is that it tends to pin women against each other. So, for example, when it comes to um, benevolent sexism, a woman, someone who's acting within benevolent sexism, they may be seen as a woman might be valued as a homemaker, right? Staying home with the kids, the traditional U.S. American role, and that woman might be compared to someone who is not a traditional homemaker, and what you see is this model, this modeling of one woman um, against another woman who does not fit that norm of that specific form of sexism. And then it goes the same way in hostile sexism. The point is, just because you're changing the focus doesn't mean you're getting away from they're getting away from the idea. Hostile and benevolent sexism are rooted uh, in woman oppression, and rooted in the belief that men should be dominant. When it comes to attitudes towards sexual harassment, intimate partner violence, and rape, those who endorse hostile and benevolent sexist attitudes are more likely to have are more likely to report less sensitivity to sexual harassment, IPV, and rape. So taken together, whenever we're operating within the system, people, when they're not aware of their own stuff, when they're not aware of this oppression, um, what they tend to do, they tend to support um, support this objectification, as well as um, the interpersonal dimensions of this oppression, right? We saw that in the lecture with sexism when it comes to rape culture, that tolerance, right? So this goes right into that. And then lastly, women in the workplace. When it comes to hostile and benevolent sexism, women within the workplace may experience a lot of women-identified people, they'll experience a lot of microaggressions, and they'll experience microassaults. And this is that old-fashioned sexist behavior, right? Then they may experience micro insults and then micro invalidations. So a woman doing her best as a CEO, by her male colleagues, she may be seen as bitchy, or she may be seen as cute. So, and I'll elaborate on that latter part. So whenever we talk about something that's cute, right, we see it as something that's like adorable. Like we look at a puppy and we're like, oh, you're so cute. And when we see it done to people, especially women, what it's done in the workplace is, when it's done in the workplace, it results in this invalidation of women's ability to do the job. So a woman identified CEO is talking about her dissatisfaction about a company product, and the board is predominantly man identified folks, and they hear her concerns and they regard it as cute. Oh, you're so cute, Samantha, with your little pearls, right? If you're telling somebody about your dissatisfaction about, a product, and they're calling you cute, it means you're not, it communicates that you're not being taken seriously. And that's what we see amongst women in the workplace by her man colleagues. I do want to make note that women, it's not just men that endorse hostile and benevolent sexist attitudes. Women also women also endorse these attitudes as well, if not more. So I want to be clear about benevolent and hostile sexism. While these are two different kinds of sexism, uh, what they do, they impact everyone within that system, right? Um, so it isn't just only men that that endorse hostile and benevolent sexist behavior and attitudes. It's also women. So I'll be clear, it impacts all of us, much like all the different things that we've said before. So I went back too quick. So when it comes to hostile and benevolent sexism, it's really important to differentiate the two. With hostile sexism, it is mainly one way of thinking about it is it's aggressive, right? There's a lot of anger. There's also a lot of hostility, hence the name, right? And it's something that's also rooted in fear. Benevolent sexism is um, more along the lines of coddling or doting on someone and at the same time telling them you're not good enough, right? So one is in essence screaming you're not good enough. The other one is condescendingly and politely telling you you're not good enough.